You want to cut your wheel costs? Do you want to cut your grinding wheel costs and just not consume near as much wheel and maybe change your wheel out every 2 weeks instead of every week? This is a technique that I've been using for 25 years, and I've been teaching my customers for 25 years. An easy, proven method I've used time and time again, and now my customers use all the time to cut their wheel costs. And here's how you do it. Who am I? I am Jeff Badger, the grinding doc, and I have devoted my life to grinding, and I teach classes in grinding. I'm not sure I like that one, so let's do that. So who am I? My name is Jeff Badger. I am the grinding doc. I have devoted my professional life to grinding, did my PhD in grinding, spent years of my life on the shop floor at companies around the world, figuring out grinding, and then teaching people about grinding, and teaching people as part of my 3-day course, and also this, just about how to grind better. All right, the second one was better there. Now we're going to move on to the new subject, upgrinding versus downgrinding. Okay, so now we're going to start with that. If you work in grinding, you have heard some crazy old wives' tales, if I can say that term, about upgrinding versus downgrinding. Which one's better? Which is not? You've heard, at least I've heard, crazy stories about, oh, we switched to downgrinding and cut cycle times in half and a bunch of other nonsense like that. So do you want to know if that's really true? Stick around, and in just a few minutes, I will fill you in on what is the story about what is upgrinding and what is downgrinding. Who am I? I am Jeff Badger. I call myself the grinding doc. I've devoted my professional life to grinding. Did a PhD in grinding. Have spent years of my life on the shop floor at companies around the world, grinding, studying grinding, measuring, trying, failing, succeeding, failing again, succeeding, and then figuring out grinding. And now a large part of my job is teaching companies and grinders, people, about how to grind better. That's what we're going to do today. So today's subject is upgrinding versus downgrinding. And oh my goodness, I go to trade shows. I have a long day at IMTS or Grind Tech or wherever, and I go to the hotel bar, sit down, have a beer, and there's some salesman who says, oh, do you work in grinding? I work in grinding. You go, oh, that's great. He goes, yeah, man, did you know that upgrinding versus downgrinding is, if you do downgrinding, it is like fabulously better? And you know, there was this company once who switched from upgrinding to downgrinding, and their burn went away, and they were able to cut their cycle times in half and grind faster. And I go, oh, wow, okay. And what was the reason behind that? Oh, I don't know, man, but it's just true. Downgrinding is way better. If you meet one of these guys or gals, don't believe them. It's all a bunch of nonsense. People who've studied this have found there is, in 99% of cases, no difference between upgrinding, or no practical difference between upgrinding and downgrinding. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Just get it out of the way. Say, don't spend any more time thinking about this. Here's upgrinding, here's downgrinding. It depends on the direction of the workpiece relative to the wheel. Applies to cylindrical grinding. Downgrinding is sometimes called climb grinding. Now, I'm not going to talk about the rare situations like in cylindrical where, okay, if you do down grinding, you may end up speeding up the workpiece. The wheel may accelerate it. But I'm going to talk about just in terms of grinding action, grinding mechanisms. Is there a big difference or a significant difference or a measurable difference between the two? Again, there's upgrinding, there's downgrinding. Downgrinding is sometimes called climb grinding. And let's take a look. You are going to hear a lot of crazy accusations, allegations, assertions. I was at a company last year where they switched from upgrinding to downgrinding and eliminated their burn and cut their wheel wear in half. Downgrinding is far superior. Be careful. Don't believe it. Upgrinding versus downgrinding gets a lot of publicity. You'll read about it in the news. CNN, MSNBC, the BBC, Al Jazeera. They're all always talking about upgrinding versus downgrinding. The Economist did an article, upgrinding versus downgrinding, about, wow, what a big difference it is. They're all wasting their time. Upgrinding versus downgrinding, the speed differential in 99% of cases is so small that it doesn't matter. The wheel's going so much faster than the workpiece, it doesn't matter. Some people have studied it, academics, and you know what? I'm not convinced they claim to have found some small differences. I'm not so sure. And some of them say downgrinding gives smaller forces and lower temperatures. Some say upgrinding. Now, what is the difference? When you do upgrinding, you go from a grit penetration depth from 0 to maximum, or a chip thickness, if you want to call it. If you do downgrinding, you go from maximum to 0. And in milling, this does matter. It makes a difference. But we're not working in milling. We're working in grinding. And whether that chip enters as 0 and goes to maximum, or maximum and goes to 0, really just doesn't have much of an effect in grinding. Okay? So for the most part, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. Whether you do upgrinding or downgrinding, it's not going to affect the grinding operation. Now, there are a few exceptions. Some exceptions are, you see this almost never, very, very rarely do you see this. I worked once with an aerospace company who spun their workpiece at like 1,500 RPM. They spun their wheel at 2,000 RPM, and you can do the math. And if they were doing downgrinding, you want to call it unidirectionally, you could do that. There was no speed differential between the wheel and the workpiece. So they were almost crushing. But when they switched to upgrinding, there was a big speed differential. That would be exception number 1. You almost never see that. Exception number 2 is if you're doing kind of cylindrical grinding and you're doing downgrinding and your wheel accelerates your workpiece. Can happen if there's no braking action in the workpiece motor. Then you can accelerate. That can be bad. And in that case, upgrinding is better. And in all the other situations, it just doesn't make any difference. It just doesn't make any difference. It just doesn't make any difference. There was a story on Fox News years ago. Bill O'Reilly and Beraldo had a big debate, the no-spin debate, upgrinding versus downgrinding. They fought it out. They started yelling at each other, calling each other's names. It was all hot air. It just doesn't matter. Except for one situation. Here's another exception. If you're doing creep feed grinding and you're grinding some kind of channel, well, if you're grinding that channel and you're doing downgrinding, so let's say it's a flint in an end mill, something like that. You'll also see this in slotting in the aerospace industry. You're taking a deep cut and you're grinding this kind of slot like in the picture. In that case, the way you apply your cooling, it's creep feed grinding, so we need good cooling. The way you apply your cooling matters. And if you're doing downgrinding, like on the left, the coolant goes into the hot zone or goes into the grinding zone, and any coolant that doesn't go in the grinding zone just kind of falls to the side. But if we're doing upgrinding, then we get this kind of cave. And so the coolant goes in, but the coolant that doesn't make it into the arc of cut into the grinding zone, which is probably 99% of the coolant, has to go somewhere. And so what it does is it kind of coalesces in this cave effect, the backwash effect, and has nowhere to go, and then it obstructs the coolant that's coming in. So in this particular case, downgrinding is better. Probably doesn't matter though, because most of the machines that you buy these days are already aware of this, and so they're programmed to do downgrinding anyway. So in this particular case, they're probably already doing downgrinding, so it doesn't matter. But if they are doing upgrinding, yes, they have to deal with the backwash effects, and they would probably do better if they switched to downgrinding. All right, here's another view of it, upgrinding versus downgrinding. We've got that cave effect on the top, but on the bottom, we don't have that cave effect in the backwash effect. Okay, so don't obsess about it. Don't worry about it. Doesn't really matter. If you have to default for one, I'd probably default to downgrinding just for some of these other issues that occasionally come up, but not really. Otherwise, this subject just gets way too much publicity.